Hello. So today I am talking about, well, I'm getting ready to move on from talking about narcissistic abuse during my marriage and getting ready to um, go on to post-separation abuse and also talk about kind of how my divorce process went. But before I get to all that, um, I have a few thoughts to share and a letter to myself when I was trying to figure out what to do with my marriage. When I realized that what I was in and how bad it was, and that it wasn't just impacting me, it was impacting my kids, and that I didn't have to endure it. One of the phrases that is said a lot among church members is endure to the end, right? And that's like, meaning yeah, you endure all things. One of the articles of faith of the church talks about enduring all things. I think that's from a scripture in the Bible in the New Testament. But yeah, so I had this idea that I had to endure what I was going through. Um, so as my role as a mother and a woman in the church, I've talked about some of these things before. I overlap a bit, but like that it was my role to help my family get to um, top tier heaven, which is what I call it now, the top level of the celestial kingdom. Like um, the the church has levels or degrees of glory in heaven, and dependent on how righteous you are in your life. And so to me, like the way I internalized these teachings when I was a member and a mom and a young woman in the church was that I had to endure this stuff that was happening in my marriage. And, this piece that it was my fault played a part of that too. But like enduring it would mean that, like, once my ex-husband and our kids, like once we all died, we would be able to get to heaven together, and God would make these problems like go away because of our righteousness in the church. And so I kind of internalized these ideas of like enduring to the end. And it wasn't until I did some therapy that I realized that I did not have to endure what was happening and it wasn't my fault. And I think that's often why church members and leaders of the church have disparaging things to say about therapy, unless that you're seeing a therapist who is endorsed by the church, who will use religious bias in your therapy. Um, but until, that's the type of therapy the church will get behind, because they feel like regular therapists are going to get you, convince you to leave the church. When in reality, for me, it was just realizing that I mattered and that I didn't have to take what was happening. And then when I tried to explain these situations to my church leaders and they didn't believe me, it just kind of like was like this gut wrenching blow that made me made me start to have questions and doubts. And another thing they like to say is doubt your doubts, and which to me is like saying don't trust yourself, because those doubts are real for a reason. And but the mind control type of things that happen in the church are really quite stunning to me now. um, but I've talked a bit about in my personal experience how like the brain chemistry and social, religious, and societal norms made it hard for me to get out of the abusive relationship I was in, and I call it a mind fuck, and I think it's the same thing as like cult psychology, the type of psychology members of cults are in. You just don't you somehow these types of people are able to little by little take control of your mind and uh, get you to be somebody that you're not, or get you to do things you wouldn't normally do, right? Like, and I think that's why I call it a mind fuck, because I feel like they just take your mind over. And then when you're told to doubt your doubts, and when you're told that you have to endure to the end, and things like that, you know, I literally believed a lot of these things, and so it's like it it that's also a bit of a mind fuck, I would say, because when you have doubts about your marriage and if you should stay in it because of how you're being treated and how your children are being treated and what you've been enduring for a very long time, and you're told to doubt your doubts. I mean, gosh, that's a really powerful thing to hear, and it makes you it's a way of keeping you in relationships, either personal relationships, religious relationships, work relationships, any kind of thing that is not good for you and that is taking advantage of you. So anyway, post-separation abuse, I'll talk about that a lot more next time, but it's a typical occurrence when you're getting out of a relationship with somebody who has narcissistic tendencies, and it usually lasts until they find a new narcissistic supply. Narcissistic supply is a term that's used to talk about the person or persons that kind of echo back to the narcissist, their opinions, their beliefs, their ideas, right? Like you just become a reflection of them, right? And so a projection. And um, and so usually when they find somebody else to do that with, the post-separation abuse can stop. And in my case, it didn't. I'm not quite sure why, but my ex-husband remarried a woman much younger than him, who he had gotten pregnant, gosh, 8 or 10 weeks after our divorce was final. But I'll talk about more that stuff like that more later. And so she was there, but for some reason, this was still happening to me and to my children. And so, uh, with the divorce process, so when one of my kids was having an issue, I think I've talked about this. My ex-husband and I, and the child were sent to therapy at LDS Family Services. Um, I began to do individual therapy, because the first therapist that we were seeing, we saw him for couples counseling as well. And then I started doing individual sessions, and that's when I started realizing that I wasn't like my husband at the time. Like his behaviors were not my fault. Like somebody else, who, like this independent third person who was hearing these stories about what was happening, could objectively tell me, hey, no, like he's responsible for his own emotions, his own actions, his own choices. And what I do, sure, could influence somebody else, but also people have choices to make, right? They choose how to respond, they choose how to behave, and they choose if they continue poor and harmful behavior or not, right? And so that was really powerful for me to learn. And I didn't want to stay married to him anymore when I figured this out. And I struggled and struggled and struggled with this decision because it was against my uh, core beliefs at the time to get divorced. I My therapist had me do a lot of journaling, and he taught me mind body bridging, which is a therapeutic modality that helps you um, like use your anxious thoughts and what's happening around you, and then you do some grounding and some meditating, and from a more grounded, centered place you go back to these experiences and thoughts and anxieties and write about them in a different way, right? And so I had been doing this journaling in this notebook using mind body bridging, and it had been months. And I was struggling, like really wrestling with this decision because I did not want to be married anymore. Nothing was changing with our couples therapy, nothing was improving. Um, and I didn't realize at the time that behind my back, my ex husband was spinning these stories about me, which I believe I mentioned. And I will probably go into again because it's part of this process that we went through to get divorced. But I didn't realize he was spinning these stories about me behind my back about what had happened to me and why I was going crazy. And so, but during this therapy work, I was struggling so much with this decision. My church leaders, my bishops, my stake presidents, who I consulted with both, all of them, were telling me to, get medication, take and stick this out and to not get divorced, right? And we're quoting church leaders to me, like apostles and prophets in the church, quoting their words to me to kind of keep me focused on staying in this marriage that was harming me and that was harming my kids. Um, and I feel like I was very emotional during this process because I had, just realized after decades what had been happening and what I was going through, what we were all going through. And, you know, having done so much couples counseling with him, it was also kind of realizing this isn't going to change. It's like I have to decide if I'm going to stay with him in this way, and if I could keep living like this. And I remember like um, the depression that came with that, and the sadness that came with it, and the thoughts of like, I don't think I will have a very long life if I have to keep living like this, because I felt like my life force kind of being sucked out of me. Like no energy for life anymore because it was hard and it was sad and it was depressing and it hurt. Um, it hurt a lot. And so I looked back through this journal one day and, page by page, like almost every day for months. And it was like I was writing the same things, like the same feelings, the same types of situations. And it took me that long to realize like the only thing I could control in this situation was myself and my choices. But I was so afraid of getting divorced and so afraid of what would happen. And the only men in my life at that time who uh, were encouraging me to leave were my dad, who was an unworthy sinner, and my therapist. Those were the only two men who were encouraging me to get out of that relationship. And I remember having a consultation with an attorney and driving home after that and calling my dad and just crying and sobbing and saying, Dad, what should I do? I don't know what I should do. And there was a moment of silence, and then he just said, "Get out of it. You need to get out of it." And I was able to lean on his strength and the strength of my male therapist to make that decision. And it was so hard because I knew that I was going against the advice of my church leaders, and I had always been, always strived to be obedient and good because I had also believed literally that, like, if you were obedient and good, you would be blessed and you would have a good life and you would have the help you needed from the church when you needed it. And so to feel like these men, these leaders were failing me was really hard to like wrap my mind around. Like, this, and I was having this cognitive dissonance about, like, okay, I've been doing all of these things the way I'm supposed to, the best I can, and I don't understand why I'm not being supported and believed and listened to. And it was really confusing and really hard. Um, and I would cry a lot about that. And I would, when it started getting out at church that I had filed for divorce, we were getting divorced, I would go to church. We were still attending the same ward because my ex-husband wouldn't leave the house. He, for some reason, thought that if he left the house, he wouldn't get the house. But I had told him I didn't want the house, never wanted the house. I needed a fresh start, and he just wouldn't leave. And so we were both attending church together, but not sitting together anymore. And I felt like that's when kind of the shunning began. I feel like I was wearing a scarlet letter, and it wasn't an A for adultery, it was a D for divorce. And, people who had been my friends, um, my closest friends stood by me, but the next uh, circle out of friends, um, and the following circles out did not support me and were not there for me. And, people wouldn't talk to me. I just was kind of alone. And, you know, feeling that um, experience of being shunned like that was also really devastating because I was in the Relief Society presidency at the time, and my ex husband was on the Stake High Council. And then when our leaders realized I was going to go through with this, he couldn't be on the High Council anymore because you can't if you're divorced. And he was given a calling to be the stake high priest group leader. I mean, sorry, the ward high priest group leader, which is a leadership calling for men who hold the Melchizedek priesthood in the ward. And he was released from his high council calling, and I was released from the Relief Society, and I was given the calling of nursery leader, which for me basically felt like I was being put in the corner because I was going from a leadership position to tending children. And not that tending children is um, uh, a bad thing, but in the church, the hierarchy of leadership and callings and what you're doing in your ward, I mean, it's basically like I was in trouble and I was being sent to timeout. And that was the kind of also a slap in the face, like, okay, I can see what's happening here. And I found out those things on my birthday um, in 2014, and my dad had died the day before. And he had had a quick diagnosis, short period of treatment for cancer during this while this was happening. So my dad, who had been my rock, even after I had been judgmental and treated him in unkind ways when I was married and so active in the church, He was my rock, and he died the day before my birthday, and then all these things were happening that I had to try to navigate without him. Um, so that was a really hard thing. It was a really painful experience. In January of the year we got divorced, we had a temporary agreement, and so then my ex-husband finally moved out of the house and down the street to apartments that his parents owned. And he'd been gone for a few days, a couple of weeks, and I woke up one night feeling like somebody was in the house, in the bedroom. And I brushed it off, thinking nothing had happened. But then I changed the locks because my kids that were living downstairs told me they thought they had heard him come in the night. So I changed the locks on the house because he wasn't supposed to be coming in, and I was afraid of him. And we were all afraid of what he was doing and why he was coming in at night while we were sleeping. And even after we changed the locks, we were having experiences like this. And so um, it's just this piece where he's still behaving in intimidating ways, even though there's supposed to be a physical distance now. And he's still not following the rules he's supposed to follow because he thinks he has this entitlement to the house and to me and our kids, and he doesn't have to follow those rules. He doesn't have to do them. And I have no way of proving that he's doing this, right? And so, anyway, it's kind of what was going on during, it was probably like 5 or 6 months from start to finish with the divorce process. And so that's kind of the precursor to post-separation abuse that I'm going to get into next in my next videos. Because it's kind of like you think it's over, but it's not. And another thing that he did to me during this time period before we were divorced is he knew how to push my buttons. He knew how to make me react or respond in a way that didn't make me look good because we had been in this dynamic with each other for a very long time. And when I found out that he had done this, it kind of confirmed to me that, like, oh, a lot of these things and a lot of these times when we've had these incidents, they've probably been intentional. So he on the phone, we were on the phone, and he I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was had something to do with parent time and him not following something we had agreed on. And so we were on the phone. I started yelling at him because of this, and he was recording it unbeknownst to me without my consent, which is legal in Utah. You can do that, and played this recording to friends, church leaders. I don't probably his family members. But what I found hurtful, one, that he had done that, but two, that, like, none of my church leaders told me that he had done this, and none of them asked me about uh, my perspective on it and what had happened. And if I remember right, I believe one of my friends had found out about this and told me. So yeah, so it just is. He was very good at creating these stories about me, and very good at creating this narrative about what was actually happening that people believed, and um, which I believe was, compounded because of the culture of in the church of one, covering up abuse in all forms, and two, privileging perpetrators. and wanting to help them more than wanting to help victims. And also this piece of victim blaming that goes along with it. So he was very inflexible during this time, very inflexible. Like, my dad had died, our divorce wasn't final. My family was having get togethers to honor his life and grieve together, and he wouldn't allow my younger children to come because he didn't have flexibility. Um, so anyway, that's a little bit about what was going on. During those few months that I was filing for divorce, I'd also gotten a part-time job at the time. My attorney told me that I needed to have some sort of income and some sort of job because the court was going to tell me I needed a job, which I don't know if that was really good advice. I see, or maybe it was then, but I see a lot of divorces happen now where um, women who have been stay-at-home parents aren't told to do that. But I was. And so anyway, I had this part-time job. I was distancing myself from him more and more. During that time, he kept, there were several times where he tried to talk me out of it. And one time I told him, I said, well, why don't you start by telling everybody that you've told these stories about me to, and everybody that you've told I'm crazy, why don't we start by you telling them that I'm not and that you made up these things? And he said, well, why don't we just show people you're not crazy? So he was basically saying to me, I am not willing to be accountable for what I've been saying about you that's not true. And that was like the final last straw for me, like deal breaker. Like if he wasn't going to be able to go and say, I've been making up these stories, I've been telling these lies about Becky, this isn't what's happening, then I wanted nothing to do with him. And so anyway, yeah, I might talk more about what happened during the divorce period, but I might not. But I kind of wanted to just talk, a little bit of a glimpse of what that was like during that time. And it was very stressful. And um, like my hypervigilance was like on hyperdrive this whole time, because he was coming into the house without permission. He was doing all sorts of things, right? So now I'm going to read a letter to myself back then. And what I would like to say to her. Um, Dear Becky B., you've done your best during your young adult years and the decades you were married to be good and obedient. Good according to the dictates of your religion, and good in that perspective means sacrificing yourself at all costs to get to your family to the celestial kingdom, where you will dutifully be a sister wife and have babies for time and all eternity, while your scary and abusive husband creates his own worlds and becomes a god. When you realize that being as good as you can be doesn't really matter in the context of your religion like you thought it did, you will be crushed, and you had believed with your whole heart and soul that you would be believed and blessed because of your obedience. You think that after the divorce, he will be a cooperative co-parent. You've seen other couples do this really well. Again, the naivete and not fully understanding who he is and what is coming. And after all, you have seen the way he treats his perceived enemies throughout your whole marriage. You don't realize that this is going to happen to you. You've never heard the term post-separation abuse. You and your children are soon going to experience the never-ending, confusing, gut-wrenching, and horror of it, though. And while you are grieving your father and trying to finish your education so you can support yourself and your children, this will continue. In the divorce, you receive no alimony, no portion of the value of your ex-husband's business that you supported him in and helped him build. His paranoia throughout your life with him included him not having any insurance of any kind for retirement or any retirement savings or any savings at all. He had dozens of guns and tools and equipment for his electrical contracting business, and you received none of the value of those things. You were smack dab in the middle of your 40s and starting with nothing. You have to finish your education. You haven't worked outside the home for 22 years. You will get minimal child support and half of the value of the home you live in, which you will use to buy a home for you and your kids. You will live off of student loans and some family support. Dear Becky B., you are stronger than you know, and you will come out of this on the other side with knowledge and expertise you can use to help others who have been in situations like yours. Your regrets don't define you. It's okay that you trusted people who weren't trustworthy. You were doing the best you could have and doing what you thought was right. You're going to make it through this, and you're going to come out on the other side with a life that you feel contentment and joy and peace in.